hello everybody. Hopefully you managed to sneak in some lunch or you'll enjoy it while we're running this panel. You're joining Creating New Business When the World is Falling Apart. I'm sure we could have come up with some other ways to express the current state of affairs, but we use that language for a different panel. What we're going to be talking about today is the obligation to create and develop new business, even when reliable sources of revenue disappear. Joining me today, I have an illustrious panel. I'll start with you, Matt Ringel. You are the brand partner. You run the brand partnership business for Red Light. For those of you who don't know what Red Light is, it's the leading artist management company in music with over 350 clients. Lots of people who you would recognize, including the likes of Dave Matthews Band, Lionel Richie, Odessa, Chris Stapleton, and you name it. Matt's been there for a long time, and he's joining us from Houston. Next up, we've got Andrew Goldstone, who, these guys actually knew each other from shared offices for quite some time. Andrew is a music manager and has worked with all kinds of great artists, including Tiesto. He's been involved in a lot of great music, including Green Velvet's Flash. Andrew and I first met when he was working on illustrious acts like the Chemical Brothers, when he was at Astroworks doing A&R. He made the same choice in life as I did, which was take a sidebar for law school, and then practiced for a little bit and then came back to the other side of it. Thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least, James Andrews, the founder of Authenticated, a venture studio designed to build better companies, launch new ideas, and illuminate influential people through experiences, content, and investment advisory. Before that, he was with Social People, another company he founded, and that was a strategic digital and social media agency. Clients you might have heard of, like Nike, Beats by Dre, many others. And before that, he was VP of Digital at Ketchum PR. So he's done a lot. He's seen it from a lot of different perspectives. I'd like to thank you all for joining me. One little piece of housekeeping just before we jump in. For those of you who haven't heard the spiel, we made a decision to have this conference be free. We wanted to reach as many people as possible and share this information. If you're in a position to, we've selected 3 different nonprofits that we're asking people to make donations to. They're on the website. There are links. It's World Central Kitchen, which is distributing food here in the United States. Organization called Film to Future, which is an education program for at-risk youth here in Los Angeles. And Music Cares, which has been helping support people in the music business through challenges for a long time. So that said, let's jump in. Matt, why don't you start? I mean, what's going on for you, kind of just personally? How are you dealing with this, and with the business before we kind of dive into bigger picture stuff? How's your business been impacted?
Like most others, pretty existentially. With the shutdown of live, live is the engine for the music business. It's, in most cases, 65 to 70% of an artist's income. And for a company like ours that kind of specializes in heavy road touring and show heavy, types of artists, as opposed to, heavy streaming or, more of the pop variety, that has a big impact for sure. And those first couple of weeks in March were largely the scramble to, postpone or cancel the spring dates, try to grab those dates, summer or later in the year. Now, obviously, we're looking at what the balance of the year is going to look like on the live front. In my group, it's been a little bit of a different experience these last number of weeks, because the lights have still remained on to some extent, because where we really focus are the brand partnerships, and whereas that business has also very changed, right? Any kind of private show for a brand, tour sponsorship, anything involving live, that's gone. However, we have seen a little bit of light in doing kind of these virtual experiences. You see tons of artists, all artists really, going online now and doing these streaming events on their own socials. There is a market right now for brands who will do that either on the artist socials or their own. And we could speak a little bit later about what some of the key learnings there have been. So, you know, we're very productive, we're very busy, but it's all at kind of a lower level with a lot of uncertainty going forward.
Great. Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Matt really, nailed it. It is a very, very dramatic downturn for us where, I mean, for me, certainly, I manage dance music producers, DJs. That is all touring all the time. 90% of income is touring. So, we've had to pivot and look for new, it's not new sources of revenue. It's, making sure that all the places that we receive revenue from are we're receiving all that we should be receiving, finding places where we can ask for more money. And then, really just concentrating on the things that still theoretically have legs: music, merch, certainly some sponsorships depending upon the size of the act. But, and really just crossing our fingers that something, that live music will return in some form or another sooner rather than later.
James, how about you?
Well, it's been quite a 7 weeks, My business relies on revenue that comes from 3 or 4 main sources. So we work with growth stage companies, tech companies, we work with venture capital firms, and then sort of high net worth investors, many of them celebrities, many of them ball players. And then my previous life, I obviously spent some time in the advertising space, in the digital space, social space. It was sort of a muscle I hadn't been flexing a lot because I've been playing kind of investment advisory role. So, for me, someone has been very comfortable in the pivot, very comfortable in sort of, dark places, right? Where a lot of unknowns. In many ways, it feels like Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 all over again. Really, really enjoying the innovation. I feel I was telling someone today, I'm like, it feels like 8th grade again. I'm finding what chord goes to here and using the iRig stream to get the best sound. So all of that kind of thinking has led me to pop up a streaming production company, which was something I didn't think about 8 weeks ago. Certainly I spent a lot of time in the esports space, so I had a lot to draw from, a lot of relationships to draw on. But I think it's an amazing time for innovating new ideas. But yeah, our business, in terms of investors, many of them are NBA players. All of them have more time now to evaluate deals because they're at home. The venture firms that have raised capital, they have to deploy that capital. The ones that are raising capital, it's a tough time, tough market to be raising a new fund. So it mixes highs and lows in this market. It's been fascinating.
James, you had a very different 8th grade experience than I did, it sounds like. Mine wasn't really exciting and fun. I was kind of the nerd in the corner, but I do.
I went to Palo Alto High School. I was just writing this post. I grew up in a town where it was all about sort of exploration of technology and innovation. So I feel really fortunate.
But I do agree that, amidst all the angst and the unknowns going forward, there is something fairly energizing about it, right? I mean, I've been in my position for 10 years and, we're good at what we do year in, year out. But every 2 years, the cycle's been that the business kind of shifts, but never overnight the way it has now. And it's totally thrown everybody off their game. And we are absolutely making it up as we go. And that can be scary, but if you can be adaptable and just kind of be water and embrace it and go with it, there is something kind of energizing about it too.
Well, and I think that's, it's funny, we are all at this sort of beginner mind. This conference is something that came up really quickly. James, we can talk about your streaming production company for the next one. But there's this really interesting energy of it's kind of okay to start anything because we actually all go, well, it is a level playing field on some parts. And, I think 3 months ago, it's like, okay, well, there are these big companies doing these things and it's all very established and built, and trying to get into something was hard. But now there's so many people trying different things that there's an opportunity for lots of new things to grow. Matt, kind of coming back to you, you mentioned that the brands are starting to look at some of the streaming stuff. I think there are so many people who are starting to stream, including me, and the conference, and on large and small, and we're all like film school 101, and then people with budgets are bringing in production companies. What are the brands saying? I mean, did they take the money that would have gone to live and put it in a pot and go, okay, how do we spend this now? Or is that money gone? What are you seeing?
No, that's going to be the second wave. There are basically 3 brackets of brands out there, just to keep it simple. The first, and it's many, are those categories that are just really decimated and devastated by what's going on. Things like hospitality business. Those types of brands just aren't doing anything right now. On the other side, there are those that are actually doing quite well in this. No one's doing well, but whose businesses don't necessarily take a downturn. Companies that are consumer packaged good companies, those are in the delivery business. A lot of tech companies, tech infrastructure type of companies are doing well. And they're spending their digital and content budgets the way they ordinarily were. And the vast majority, though, are in the middle. And that's those that don't really know what to do yet. All companies, their first order of priority these last number of weeks is accounting for the health and safety of their employees as the world shifts to working at home and this pervasive virus. Second, they've been focused on batting down the hatches on their operations, things like their supply chains. Marketing, the area where we live a little bit in music, that's substantially like number 4 or 5 priority. It is not among the very top priorities of these companies. I do think that as we start to get into, deeper into the second quarter, into the third, and companies stabilize, and this doesn't become a new normal because we don't want this to be normal ever. But as this becomes a little bit more routine, I do think you're going to see those that have committed to festivals, those budgets aren't going to be spent on live. Now they're going to be putting it online. Ditto with sports. They're not necessarily putting it behind the big television advertising sports packages. I think you'll see more opportunity both in esports and in music content online.
And James, what about you too, in terms of what you're seeing from the VCs and people who are looking at deals? Is the money still being spent? Is it paused?
Yeah, I probably, in full transparency, am spending more time with the brands. I'm doing some advisory work with some great companies in my portfolio, advisory companies. And so VCs, tough place. VCs, we've had a couple of virtual dinners. And so just to kind of recap what the outcomes of those were, really, you have a group of investors that are going to find great deals. I'm doing some scouring and some, looking at some virtual streaming companies outside of Zoom. No disrespect to Zoom, but there's a whole world outside of this particular platform. Really interesting companies, and there are certainly venture firms that are looking for, what the landscape looks like in and around work from home, changing work environments, the future of work life in general. A lot of work there, and so I think, for those investors, those of which that I had spent time with that were thinking about what the next wave of investments look like, even the next wave of cities. So a lot of the work I do is outside of Silicon Valley and New York and LA. And it's about these other interesting opportunities that happen in great cities that maybe not on the radar. I think that this is a time to accelerate the deal flow in places and sort of use a competitive advantage of availability, use a competitive advantage of, valuations and all kinds of market conditions. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I'm actually hands-on with with a particular startup right now, and I'm just, you know, I think that to Matt's point, like it's going to be an interesting shakeout. And I'm looking at things like social, which I think is really crowded, and looking for those companies that are kind of going against the grain, creating new paradigms. You know, and I think we're in store for an interesting investor market, if nothing else.
And what about on the brand side?
So I am sort of building sandboxes and playgrounds with brands. There are, to Matt's point, line items still there. I think it's about introducing a set of marketers who probably have been traditional in how they spend. So if their metrics have been, you know, Instagram and sort of, you know, especially on the paid media side, I think it's causing a lot of marketers to be better, savvier, earned media folk, and owned media, obviously. And so I find that there's going to be a number of marketers now that I call week 7. This is like a shakeout. We're like in a period going from 7 to 8. You know, there's a bunch of marketers that, you know, have some money to spend, realize it's really crowded, engagement rates are horrible right now in social, and want to look for new ways to engage and have to lean on owned and earned a little more. And earned means everything, right? This is like our couch. This is like the Fallon show. And there's Zoom parties every hour. I'll leave your Zoom party, go to another one. And so how do you measure, you know, in those places and spaces? Obviously we know it's happening on ABC and more traditional. And that's going to be interesting too, to see how brands take some of their dollars they traditionally were spending on broadcast and then partner in what I call social TV 2.0. We talked about it earlier in the 2000s and sort of social TV 1.0, but now we're moving to this new phase. So I'm spending time with some you know, brand folks who are thinking about that.
It feels like we are starting, it's like first there was the sort of the shock of the changes that were implemented by the government restrictions around the virus. And now we're really starting to, it's like okay, that's there. People have dealt with what they need to on a business level in terms of HR and either downsizing or doing whatever they have to do. But ultimately, for both people who may be starting to think about launching their own company or starting a new project, or those who are still driving, there is still this, you have to find money, you have to do the business to stay alive, right? So Andrew, I want to come to you because, you know, I think what we're seeing so much of right now is the work of people like your clients who are out there doing DJ live streams, and so much of what's happening in that space, you know, there's a ton of traffic. Beatport's Reconnect, you know, had a huge impact globally in terms of unifying the audience and raising money for nonprofits. And, you know, there was a lot of goodwill and energy. All the DJs volunteered their time. And I have a bunch of friends who were DJs who were like, yeah, I'm doing a ton of live streams, but I'm not making any money. It's like $10 to $200. And so, you know, are you seeing, Andrew, anybody actually writing checks around this? Or is it still kind of at the point where we're doing it for the good of connecting the community right now and we'll figure out the rest later?
No, I mean, there are some checks being written, but, you know, I think that the reality is that from a brand perspective, the return on that investment is not significant. So it's not terribly attractive. And I think, you know, it's a larger conversation about whether there is an opportunity to, you know, to gate live streams and charge some kind of, you know, entrance fee. I personally, I think, you know, now that everybody's given it away, it's a little hard to put the genie back in the bottle. I think, you know, I'm sure there are individual circumstances where, you know, the right act can do something and have it make sense at, you know, at the right price. But I think generally speaking, you know, it's just not, it's not an income generating activity. I think the other problem is that there is so much horrible live stream content that it, you know, the fatigue that everybody is feeling of watching, you know, people just standing in their bedroom or studio with not much setup. It's just, you know, sure, in the first week or two, it's interesting. You get to see somebody's house or whatever. But once you've watched a couple, yeah, it's just not, it's not compelling entertainment. So I think, you know, I have a client, we were talking about doing something, spending some real money on doing, you know, real production for a live stream. But the problem is that there's so little, you know, unless you are operating on an existing brand platform. And by that, I mean, you know, Ultra, Insomniac, something where you know that there are significant eyeballs that will be there. It's just, it's not worth investing the money to do that. And things like, you know, places like Insomniac have a, you know, they have a studio, they have their own production. You're not doing your own thing. So it's a, I think, you know, there's no question it's an area of opportunity. But I think we need a little bit more time to see what the right play is in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of responses because I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Andrew, though I would quibble with a couple of points. I think
let's quibble.
Let's go. I think the return is there for brands that are moving into this. I don't think that was your point. I think you were talking about the investment an artist makes into, say, strong production values and live streaming, and what they're seeing in return if they're putting it out there as free.
Well, I mean, I think I was saying both. I mean, I think that some of the stuff that has happened, that some of the streams that have happened that have been brand sponsored, they're not, you know, you're not, because again, the brand and the artist alone are driving viewership rather than having a larger, you know, dance music brand platform to rely on. Yeah. You're just simply not going to get the same numbers that the brand would, in my opinion, and from what's transpired internally within our roster, that the brand is going to be super happy with.
Yeah. Go ahead, John. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, to some extent that's the case, though, when a brand is coming in. So, for example, we've done a few with Verizon, we've done a few with Bud Light and their dive bar series. When they're putting a buy behind it, the numbers get to be pretty substantial. I mean, that first Dave Matthews Verizon show, we had 3 million people watching live.
Sure.
Millions, you know, beyond it. Now, they really amplified it. But I acknowledge that those are kind of like the bigger programs and perhaps the exceptions. What I will definitely say is, you know, we've struggled a lot in this initial period with the whole free versus paid question. And I think those first number of weeks, you saw many artists diving right in, I think for two reasons. Number one, you know, they were at home with time on their hands and feeling disconnected from fans and wanting to do something out for their fan base. So they do what they do, which is pick up their instrument or their boards and decks, whatever, and they start to play and engage. And the other is, if there are causes, you know, always it's the artist who can, you know, lead that in, be it Live Aid to, you know, Global Citizen or what have you. So they do lead. But I also agree that there's now this glut of free streams out there. And that's something that I think in this next period of weeks, you're going to see start to change a little bit. One of the things that we've made clear to brands is we've had a lot of approaches by brands who say, hey, we want to do such and such for charity and have your artist in it, and we'd like them to do it for free. And we say, well, no. If our artist wants to do something for charity, they can do it on their own platform, and it's their charity, and they'll do it for their fans. If they're going to do it for you, Brand X, you need to pay the artist. So we've been beating that drum that the artists have to be getting paid.
Go ahead, James.
I just want to add, I feel like what's missing in this conversation is the moment when the artist thinks like a media property or a media publisher, or when the artist thinks about community in a really distinct way. I'm really good friends with DJ Jazzy Jeff. He's one of my really close friends. I spent a lot of time with Jeff, used to manage him. And we've been talking a lot in this kind of period about, and he's doing really well. He came through COVID, thank God. missed the whole D-Nice run, you know, and really carving out an interesting niche for himself. And we've been talking a lot. He's been doing tremendous numbers. He has the advantage of thinking like a gamer before all of this, spending time with Twitch, kind of, you know, understanding production. You know, we've all kind of been in that. I also find that like those of us that come from electronic or hip hop kind of are walking intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs already. So we think, or we're wired a little differently. I started off in the music business in the hip hop days. And what I love about some folks I see is that they're thinking about their stream as more than just the stream. They're thinking about this aggregated network, other things they can do. I think there are limitations around IG, but I think it's also an opportunity for artists to step up and to work hand in hand with their teams, to think more like entrepreneurs, to understand communities. And not every artist, not every DJ I know understands this. So but I think it's an important moment, Kairos moment, if you would, where artists start to think like startup founders, and they start to think about their businesses a lot differently. I actually had a dinner last week in one of my rooms, and it was about the pain of a manager right now. And I had Carmelo Anthony's manager and another manager in music, and I just basically a TikTok manager. It was just like the thin line was management. But it's a new day for managers to kind of start thinking differently. I'm not going to say any names, but I talk to a lot of managers on behalf of some advisory work I do, and they're lazy as fuck. You know what I mean? And like, it's time for managers to step up, and it's time for artists to think like entrepreneurs. And I think there's an awesome opportunity that we've all been waiting for. I've been waiting for it, where there's a different mindset and different wiring, and this moment, and also these tools are challenging.
I feel like Andrew, you got to put the gloves on, and you know, what are you? I wasn't aimed at Andrew anyway, by the way. Well, if you want to create some drama. Yeah. What are you? Where are you seeing light? And I want to, I'll just note for everybody. You know, I think I do want to talk about the big artist business, but I also want to talk about the smaller artists, right? I think when you have somebody like Dave Matthews, you can have a conversation with Verizon and they'll be like, yeah, we love Dave Matthews. That's great. That guy's they've been touring forever, and they got it, you know, whatever they want, do it. You know, we just want to be in the Dave Matthews business. I also want to talk about what you're seeing for the smaller artists, because they're the people that don't have the resources without touring. And so they're the ones who probably are most in need of brand dollars just to stay viable. Andrew,
but the small artists can't get brand dollars. You know, right. That's really, I mean, you know, for the most part. I mean, obviously it's all relative, but you know, the brands aren't looking to spend, you know, 10 grand on somebody that is in their minds niche. Like, that's not interesting. So you know, it's from our perspective, from the, you know, from the company's perspective, like, we're, you know, making sure that, you know, what's the status of the publishing deal? Can we renegotiate? You know, can we get an advance from the PRO? Can we, you know, have all the royalties been paid? Can we get a pipeline advance? You know, really just shaking all the trees to make sure that the income that would normally come in and would feel sort of like a bonus, but now has become the, you know, the lifeline, making sure that we're really maximizing that income. And then, you know, just hustling for opportunities. I talk to the brand people at the agencies I work with every, you know, a couple times a week. And again, you know, there's not a lot there, but we're getting put up for stuff, and you know, one thing will come in every couple weeks, and it's there's something there. But, you know, also Twitch, like, you know, that just feels, I have a client who is who's done very well on Twitch, and, you know, there's subscribers, there's ad income, there's just, you know, and if you really maximize that platform, there is real income to be generated. So you know, it's really just looking at what the individual artist has, you know, what their what their kind of assets are. Like, are they good in front of the camera? Do they know how to do this? You know, do they write songs that aren't right for them? Let's shop those around. Let's get other people to, you know, to cut those. Just really looking for any opportunity to kind of try it, to try and generate, you know, income, but also just raise the profile at a time when everybody's hustling. I just want to make sure that when we're back to normal, that my clients have done everything that will hopefully put them farther in front of where they were than, you know, than when this began. I just think this is really, it is a time of opportunity. And if you're aggressive about it, you know, I think that you can come out of this in a better situation than you started.
And with your younger or less exposed clients, you know, with your smaller clients, is the advice you're giving right now, is it any different? Because, you know, it's all about the hustle, and now they, you know, with the live revenue and live touring side gone, you know, they have time in their calendar. So is it just, you know,
yes, make music, like just make music, you know, reach out to your friends, like who do you want to collab with, what's going on, get in the mix, like just be out there. I mean, you know, the reality is, you know, there are the artist has to James's point, the artist has to be entrepreneurial as well. The artist has to view it as their responsibility to do the things, like, you know, I can reach out to another manager and say, oh, my artist wants to work with you. But when the artist does it, it's just, you know, it is 10 times more successful. And a lot of artists just, you know, I realize not every artist is an extrovert, but, you know, this is the moment to, like, take advantage of the relationships that you've built. And even if you haven't built a relationship with somebody, you just happen to follow them on Instagram, you know, say like, yo, I love your new track. I would love to make a track with you. You know, let me know if you're interested. You just have to, like, put yourself out there. It's not easy for any of us, but, you know, that's the hustle.
There's a couple of stories that you reminded me of, you know, when you said you were shaking all the trees, kind of looking for, is there a way to renegotiate a deal and kind of get a little extra money or whatever? You know, one of the entrepreneurs that we interviewed earlier, Milana Rabkin from STEM, the CEO over there, you know, they're giving advances based off your digital revenue streams. So they're basically like, yeah, we can help you. Let's look at your last couple months. If you're already on their platform, and if you're not on their platform, you can get on their platform and share your numbers. And they're basically saying, yeah, here's a deal, here's a loan, there's terms to it, they're artist friendly, no copyrights are being taken in exchange for it, but they're trying to help support it. And then there was another example, and
not even a loan, it's a straight out
advance.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
it's a debt vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. But
the other thing I just wanted to mention is, you know, there was a good story with Dennis White, who was talking about a project he did with a guy from Fox. And speaking of staying home and writing, you know, Dennis wrote a song and then it was timely, and then started shopping it around, and then it got picked up, and now it's a part of a campaign at Fox. And, like, it was completely driven by, well, what can I do right now? I can write a song. Now the song is done. What am I going to do next? And going out and looking for it, right? And I'm curious to see from all of you kind of what doors you're knocking on, with kind of maybe that in a way that you wouldn't have before, to try to open some opportunities now. James?
Well, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I had this theory that, you know, your network is your net worth. And so, you know, I'm super thankful that I kind of invested in my own ecosystem of, you know, brand folks, agency folks, VCs, managers. So I kind of fish in my own pond now. And then I use social to kind of, you know, talk about, you know, what I see in the market. So I'm kind of fishing in my own, I'm looking within my own network, and all of us have networks. I think I got really intentional about who's actually in my network, and I built an app around it, and we all kind of party, and we're doing dinners in Stockholm and hanging out in LA. And so I'm really, really thankful that a lot of my deal flow and a lot of the opportunities with brands come from right within my network. But if I was out there listening, I'd also be thinking about, who is your network? And to Andrew's point, man, it's just like people are available, and so like it's never been a greater time of availability. And the worst they'll say is no. And I've never had a problem with no. So,
yeah.
So I feel like, if your network is your net worth, it's kind of there for you. I've spent, I've been posting on LinkedIn more. I haven't necessarily been mining, but I certainly have been taking things in on LinkedIn and getting a lot of inbound. I publish a blog on Substack, and so I get a lot of inbound from there. But yeah, I think it's cultivating, and I do like a call list, and so I shake trees and go through like who are some folks I haven't talked to in a while and connected with, and do some connections. I wish I had a deeper method for what I do, but since I was a schmuck trying to go to law school, which I thought I was going to do what you and Andrew did, I thought I was going to become a lawyer. And so when I was at UCLA,
didn't miss much.
I didn't miss anything. Good to know. I'm looking at you guys going, is this the future version of what? But I decided to sidestep law school, and I remember just being at a law firm, and I also got an internship at Columbia Records. And I just, invested in, relationships back then, and had my own Monogram stationery. And I only tell that story to say that I think it goes back to those simple kind of things. Maybe don't get Monogram stationery like I did. But it is about, reaching out to folks, connecting with folks, getting plugged in. And there's never been a greater time to ask. I mean, I sit on calls, 30 minutes at least once a week with, somebody who's, coming out of college. I think the talent market is fascinating because, we're in trouble. I'm a father of a high school senior, father of a college graduate. It's a scary market out there, but it's also an opportunity for younger people. I'm just kind of speaking to those out there that are in that kind of 18 to 24-year-old range. This is the time to kind of, if you never use LinkedIn, get on. If you're scared to reach out to people, step into that fear and just send a message.
1 second, James. I want to rewind a second, because you mentioned that you have an app that you built to kind of develop that network and keep the communication together.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about exactly what that is?
Yeah. So I have a stack. My stack is, first I built a network on WhatsApp and Slack about 3 years ago. I actually got screwed in a business deal and didn't know what to do. Woke up in the middle of the night and connected 50 people on WhatsApp. And I kind of just gave my network away 3 years ago, and I wanted everybody to kind of connect. And that turned into sort of a regular dinner series, us gathering at dinners, hijacking other conferences, Brilliant Minds, Summit Series, all the regular ones on the circuit. And then, kind of left the land of Slack and WhatsApp and worked with Gina Bianchini, who has an incredible platform called Mighty Networks. And so we have a Mighty kind of platform, and you can, just like Facebook, friend each other. And then I also use Community, which is one of the companies I advise, and they have a text messaging app. You guys have probably seen it. Celebrities out there saying, hey, text me. What people don't realize in the back end is a pretty robust CRM system, which allows me to just talk to people in kind of my communities through text messaging, which allows me to kind of circumvent. I promoted this event directly to people who want to give a shit about me speaking at events, which is not everybody, right? So I can just talk to those people. I DJ as well, so I have a DJ group, meditation, so forth. But yeah, I thought a lot about like the communities I live in. Been really fortunate to kind of spend time in other people's communities, and now I've kind of galvanized that all in my own kind of stack.
And Andrew, what are you seeing? Just to shift subjects a little bit, like with the artists at your company, what are the success stories right now about what people are doing, whether it's just in terms of building an audience that then maybe the second time they do it, a brand will be interested because they already proved that there's an audience, or partnerships that you're seeing that are coming together now?
Yeah, I mean, Steve Aoki is really as a brand deal machine. And it is just, staggering what that team has turned around literally in the last 4 weeks. I mean, the numbers are extraordinary. And that really, there are not many people who are at that level. And Steve is really unique in that, he has love from brands. Brands really want to be associated with him, and it's sort of irrespective of music. He's become a larger than life personality. And so from Fortnite to Chipotle to I like renewing existing deals with companies that should, objectively not be renewing deals right now because they're in industries that are hurt. But just they have done an extraordinary job, just bringing in deal after deal after deal. But it's, again, that's a very, very high bar.
Can I ask you about Aoki? Quick question, Andrew.
Yeah, sure.
Is the success of Aoki because he invested early in his own digital platforms and community? Is that part of it? Or what do you think it's, besides his team, of course?
I think that he's done an extraordinary job just sort of continuing to build his brand and awareness outside of the dance music space. Mm-hmm. A lot of that has happened through his brand deals. And because of that, he has risen to be something that there really aren't any other DJs who do deals like that. I mean, even Guetta doesn't do deals like that.
The secret of Steve's success, and you could extrapolate this out to what other artists can be thinking about right now, it is precisely because he has extended himself into some other lifestyle and passion points. For example, fashion, something he's incredibly passionate about. And he has several different deals where he actually designs and has his own lines. Art, it's another one. You go to his house. I mean, he has he's a collector. He has every major artist usually commissions some kind of art around Aoki and his image. Tech and health. He is fascinated with brain science and technology. And these are things which, all have a connection point to music, but he's really leaned in. And both, as Andrew was saying, through his brand associations, as well as some of his other, activity and what he talks about, what he does PR and earned media about, that helps build his credibility in those areas. So, if you then translate that to what can other artists be doing in this downtime, well, it is, lean into some of those passion points too. Of course, I would foremost be writing music. That's the best thing an artist can be doing. Write a song. But, we've got a lot of country artists right now. And these are folks who are into hunting, fishing, and they've got farms and they build things. And we're telling them to go out and capture that content, show it to us, and those can be bases on which to do other things.
But I think the other thing about Steve, just quickly, is that he is a tireless promoter. He is constantly, whether it's for his music, for his clothing brand, for the brands that he works with, he is, the energy that dude has is ridiculous. And that, it truly is. His hustle is a significant portion of why he is where he is. And he's been able to just outwork everybody else.
Yeah. So quick anecdote, and he must have read Jim's blog on how to be like the most efficient networker out there. I was in Cannes last June, the big advertising conference, and we had worked with Steve to get him to do this little show that was going to be on somebody's yacht. Okay, and it was a private.
Lovely. Sounds lovely right now.
It's exactly where we all want to be right now, and we won't be for a long time. But he had 10 minutes in between meeting the CEO of this company and going to play, just 10 minutes. And most artists would kick back, maybe have a drink, hang out, whatever. In those 10 minutes, he called one producer who he was doing a collaborative track with and giving notes, and calling a second one and arranging, his next song and project with them. So just a way to find those little moments and still be hustling and working. It was fascinating to witness.
I mean, that was, that reminds me, and ultimately I think a lot of what we're all saying is outreach, right? It's one, being creative and creating new things to talk about, but the other part is the outreach and discussion around it. As a music journalist, periodically, one of the stories I love about Mick Jagger, and I think David Bowie did the same thing too, whenever they used to tour, well, Mick Jagger's still touring, right? But they would call a couple of journalists in every market personally. And they'd say, hey, I'm going to be in town. I'd love for you to come to my show. Hopefully you can make the time. And like, literally, it was these real brief interactions, but it's like, as a journalist, you get a call like that and you're like, oh my God, this person cares enough to take a minute and go, you should come to my show. And you show up and you're like, yeah, I was invited by Mick Jagger, like what gets better than that? Matt, I want to ask you one thing, because so many deals that were in place for this summer, for the spring and summer, and we'll see what happens with the fall. Are you seeing, and this applies to the rest of you too, but I think Matt, I'll start with you. Are you seeing deals between brands and promoters and artists and all that? Are you seeing them get remixed right now? If a brand had said, yeah, we're going to put $1 million into these 3 festivals, with the following activations, are you seeing the collaboration remain intact, or is it kind of like everyone's like, what's my force majeure clause say? It says act of God, COVID virus, I'm out. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. How are those conversations?
It's amazing how many people have suddenly become amateur lawyers and insurance brokers interpreting what a force majeure is. There's 3 different ways in which those conversations are going, and they are plenty. Particularly where there's just a good feeling all around. People want to do right by each other, and oftentimes it's trying to redefine and pivot. Right? If the deal was for a performance or it was a sponsorship, and those things are not going to be happening, there might be some other type of collaboration, or maybe it's an online performance and virtual meet and greet that happens. So we are seeing a lot of great collaborative flexibility in redefining. A second path is to postpone a lot of things that were scheduled for this year. So for example, tour dates, if those are rescheduled for next year, oftentimes we're just saying, well, look, the partnership is going to go with it. And, maybe it's going to be Q4, maybe it's going to be next year, but when it happens, you'll be there. The third is it's over because it just can't happen. So it's usually just, it's one of those 3. We're finding most companies willing to make it a positive conversation.
In my world, I have one particular thing. I'm working with a family office in New York City, and we have this big event planned for September in New York. And, it's been, I think, just helping them reimagine what event looks like and what community looks like. But they're still spending the money. But they're actually, to me, they're advancing what was in the Evernote, I call it. Like, we should have been doing this anyway. We should have been thinking about live streaming anyway. And so we just kind of moved some ideas to the top. I was going to, we're working with them for a longer period of time to build this kind of experience. So in that case, it's just helping them understand how to redirect their dollars and actually open up for us what will be a more global event, what will be an even better event. And when things get back to a new normal, wherever we're going, the event actually has more resonance because we actually spent the time broadening our horizons, thinking differently about the speakers and talent that we're going to use. So in that particular case, money's still being spent, and I think money gets better because we can actually, build a broader set of assets to actually take to the market as an event experience.
And have any of you made any like ridiculous asks? I mean, are you guys knocking on new doors and kind of going like, hey, I've never tried this, but why not? Any ideas that you are finding traction with that you're surprised? as you kind of look for opportunities?
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I don't. Go ahead. You go. I'm sure you have some funny doors that you've knocked out.
No, so I was actually going to sort of put a point on something that Jim said before, which is what we're finding right now is it's kind of like two modalities. Networking is everything right now, and relying on the network you have to get things done as quickly as they need to right now, that is just serving us well. An example would be when Bud Light wanted to launch their dive bar tour home edition. They called us at 9 in the morning on a Friday. We had to show up at 8 o'clock that night. That can only happen because we have a history of just knowing how each other works and just doing things quickly. But on the flip side of that, it is absolutely the time to be imagining new companies, new types of partnerships, new businesses, and reaching out, because everybody is sitting at home. No one can say they're traveling. No one can say they're unavailable. They're all available. So they can say no. You got to be okay with that. But you're getting people right now, and you could do Zooms with them right off the bat, or
Everybody
it's really great. So we've had a couple of those just flyer type of conversations with receptivity. So that's,
you can give somebody a solution right now in a way that helps them achieve their goals. You're probably going to get to a yes much quicker, just because everyone's looking for ways to advance whatever it may be. And I love the idea of just picking up the phone and trying it on, because the person on the other side of that just may have no idea. For example, speaking of starting new companies and reaching out to the network, I know Alicia Carlin from her work at Electric Forest as a talent buyer, and she's now a talent buyer at AEG here in LA. And I was like, oh, Alicia, we're doing this conference. I'd love to involve you. And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, I heard about your new company, Live Lesson Masters. I'd love to know a little bit more. And she's telling me, and that's the platform that's hosting this conference. And that company was launched in March as a side hustle by her and her partner, an artist. And what they opened up was she had all these relationships with artists and figuring it out. She's a talent buyer. Now you can't buy talent for live shows. She's like, oh, wait a minute. There's probably an audience for, and by the way, I've been on all these Zoom calls, but there's also this audience where if I can take the artists and they can teach, there are probably people who would sign up and pay money to have a private lesson from a guitarist in the band they like. And so she's created a revenue stream for the artist. She created the platform, and the fans are happy too. And all of that was in the last month, and I think she is a throwaway comment. Literally Friday of this week, we were sitting around going, okay, how are we going to do this? Like, we have Zoom, we're going to figure it out, but like, there are other platforms. None of us are live streaming experts on panels. And James, who's our producer, he just went and started researching, and we were all kind of like, we got the speakers, we've got the message, we have people registered, and now what are we going to do? And Alicia was like, on Friday, literally as a throwaway comment, said, do you need help hosting this thing? And very much about the relationships and already have. I had a long trusting relationship with Alicia, and even though this is brand new, I said, yes, please help us solve our problem, because this is the thing that's causing me the most stress around this entire conference.
Well, if I can answer that, Simon, that's actually what my answer was going to be, versus like, am I knocking on any strange doors, or am I sprinting in 3 days and popping up new businesses? That's probably where I am. I mean, there's someone in my network that popped up a delivery service business in 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to use that infrastructure to think about drop ship, kind of direct to consumer stuff. So I think the best thing you can do in this economy is, is sprint. There's a book called Sprint for you guys who are listening. Amazing book. It's about 5-day sprints written by some Google X guys. Obviously, Lean Startup is another one. And sort of these ideas, these minimal viable kind of companies, I think can go a long way. And in many ways, that's kind of what I've done. I have a few of them in the education kind of space right now, playing around with. And to your point, I don't know a lot about building a infrastructure around education and a whiteboard and streaming and how that goes together. So I went to my folks in Sao Paulo and Brazil, and they had a company that was in education. There's also a bunch of companies that, you know, were kind of not, you know, looked at like, oh yeah, one day that's going to happen, and all of a sudden they pop up. And there's one in particular that we streamed on. They're an Andreessen Horowitz-backed company. They had a streaming platform used for hackathons, and now all of a sudden it's game on for them. And so I think there's a lot of, if you can find the right partnerships and relationships, there's a lot of people who are experiencing boom, and they're looking for talent. They're looking for creativity. They're looking for celebrities. They're looking for DJs. They're looking for the creative economy to kind of step up. And I feel like it's a beautiful kind of place to be in, where the creative economy meets innovation.
They're also looking to help people and to solve problems. And it's the last thing I want to say about it. It's not merely that people are stuck at home. It's that quarantine has had a great leveling effect. We're all in the same place. We're all people at our homes in front of our laptops. You know, some of us have the $2 glass of wine. Fred Rosen's got the $25,000 bottle of wine. But we're all still, you know, in that same position.
Yeah.
And we're frustrated that we can't do more to help and to solve problems. So if you're calling someone and you've got a proposition or a way to do something, people are going to be receptive to that right now in a way that maybe they weren't in the routine and the bustle of their normal life.
So we got a few minutes left. There's one question from the audience, and I'll raise that, and you can either grab it, you know, or if there's something that you're truly inspired by right now that you're seeing and you want to share, kind of either one of those. The question is, what's the future of experiential marketing? And I'm going to say under COVID restrictions. I'm not sure if that's where the question wanted it to be, but maybe it's broader. You know, as we're here and our experiences are very limited. So what do you guys think the future is going to be there?
Well, I think I'm also advising some interesting public health companies. And so I think there is obviously going to be this intersection of where public health, technology, and experiential come together. And I think there's an ecosystem. There's going to be some new players that show up to the venue space, the venue kind of ecosystem, and they will probably come from the public health space. And so I'm working with one such kind of biohacker right now. And I think that that's an interesting new set of bedfellows that come into our world of entertainment, are folks that are solving for public health things, who don't understand entertainment and DJ culture and any of this stuff. So just from a standpoint of where I see it going, I think that there's a natural relationship that we're going to start to have with some of my folks that are in that world.
One of the Andrew, I'm coming to you next. One of the panels that's this afternoon is actually about opting in for the greater good, and it's really about, you know, that crossroads with the health information and your privacy and data. You know, in Asia, there's some clubs that are already in China where it's like you have a QR code that's individualized, and if it doesn't show you're healthy and green light, you're not getting into the club. That opens a whole bunch of conversations about how that information is protected. So we'll visit that later. Andrew, any kind of closing thoughts you want to add in?
You know, I just, there's one thing that's happening that I'm very intrigued by, which is this like drive-in concert thing. I think it's a bit cheesy at the moment, but I think that there are opportunities there. You know, there are certainly problems to solve, like bathrooms, you know, food and beverage, and how that all works. But we've had a lot of discussions about it internally. I feel much better about it than some of the other managers, but it's something that I think, you know, as with many things, you know, the prime move, the first mover really gets the rewards on that, because I just don't think that there's a lot of longevity in it. But I think for 2 months, 3 months, it's probably really interesting. And if somebody can do it in a way that is a little bit more compelling, I mean, the European ones seem to have a better handle on it than what I've heard sort of being discussed for the US. But to me, that's a real interesting area. It's not a huge money making area, but I think certainly from a press perspective, it's really interesting.
Well, and there's that idea of people being in pods and experiencing music together, but in separate pods, right? And how that expands beyond the driving concept could be really fascinating. Matt, any last bits of wisdom?
Experiential will be back full force. We just need to have live come back.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for participating and viewing. Again, if you joined us a little bit late, please check out the nonprofits that we're supporting on our website. Registration was free. You didn't even have to pay for food and drinks. If you're in a position to do so, and you would ordinarily go to another conference and spend a bunch of money and you have it in your pocket, would love if you could put a little bit of that money in one of these organizations' donation bins. They're working hard to help people right now, and there are a lot of people who could use it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks.